The New Zealand PM waking up in Australia for the first time in a long time. We don't know why she wasn't so keen before, touching down in Sydney last night.
Jacinda Ardern went straight to Kirribilli House for dinner and a catch-up with good mate Anthony Albanese. The pair all smiles, a sign of a very close relationship. She joins us now in the studio. A big round of applause for the New Zealand PM. Welcome back. Nice to see you.
It's so nice to be back.
What did it feel like?
You know, actually that first trip out of New Zealand, which was just a short time ago when I headed into Singapore and Japan, yeah, that felt pretty momentous.
Yeah.
But brought back a lot of memories coming back yesterday because, of course, the last time I was here was the 28th of February 2019, 2020, as we were coming into COVID. And we had our first case announced while I was here. And so it just brought all of that back. Yeah.
Its time seems to have flown, but also taken an extraordinarily long amount of time at the same time. It is great that we're all getting back, visiting each other's countries. People are excited. And that was a great meeting you had with Anthony Albanese last night. And everybody's intrigued about the vinyl record swap.
I actually didn't anticipate that we would be filmed at the greeting because, of course, usually then you'll think a little bit more through whether or not are we going in for the handshake, are we in for that? I just didn't think about it because
you didn't have a head clash.
I couldn't see that there were cameras back in the distance, so that was a very organic view you have. That's quite authentic. That was us genuinely catching up and genuinely happy to see each other. So yeah, we did exchange a few gifts.
Well, you can always be assured that therell be Australian media hiding in bushes.
Yes, I am now. So
now you know.
It obviously is a good relationship, and we heard it actually didn't get onto the vinyl records before we move on. What was the swap of records?
Oh, so actually, I think it was probably mostly by chance. I thought we'd go and get him I know that he enjoys music, and so I shared with him a few from the Flying Nun label in New Zealand, Aldous Harding, The Clean, the compilation. So, and look, he looks genuinely happy, I think, to have received them. And in exchange, I got Powderfinger, Spiderbait and Midnight Oil. So,
so why didn't this happen with Scott Morrison? You never thought to bring him a back catalogue of Flying Nun records?
We did talk about music on an occasion, but I'm not sure that I would have exactly picked necessarily the right music if I think I was given that task. So
you're being very diplomatic. I can see you writing that one. Yeah, very clever. All right. Despite obviously your close relationship with Albo, there are going to be you're pushing for some changes with our migration policy, sending I think Crims home. Obviously, that can be resolved pretty easily with a discretionary aspect of this policy. Have you heard that is what the Australian government's prepared to do to water it down a little bit?
And look, just to be clear, that the issue we have is not with deportation. We deport as well. You know, if a New Zealander comes to Australia and commits a crime, send them home. That's wrong. But when someone comes here and essentially, or hasn't even really had any connection with New Zealand at all, has spent their entire formative years and grown up here and have all their connections in Australia and are essentially Australian, sending them back to New Zealand, that's where we've had the grievance. And so, look, I've heard the Prime Minister, prior to winning the election, speak to his acknowledgement that that is the part of the policy that we've taken issue with. Even that acknowledgement says to me he's hearing us, he knows it's a problem, he knows it's a tension.
He supports the policy in general, though.
Absolutely, and we've never asked deportations as a general rule to stop. We're not going to be hypocritical about it because we do it too. It's just those extraordinary cases that really trouble us.
So you think there'll be movement with that? There's indications of that. There'll be in the discretionary aspect of it.
I've raised it. I want to give the PM some time to consider that. It's been a bugbear for us for a long time, so I would like to see movement on it.
Okay.
All right, both of our countries have a lot in common at the moment, a lot of pressures in terms of cost of living, recovering from the pandemic, and then, of course, there's the region and the might of China. China has told you to stop interfering in the Pacific. What's your reaction to that?
Oh, you know, I take the same view that I always have. We are a Pacific nation. You know, our connections into the Pacific, they run deep. The family. You know, we have large Pacific communities in New Zealand, Pacific members of Parliament, Pacific ministers. So the relationship for us is not a bilateral relationship, it's a family relationship. And so I don't see our relationship as as ever being able to be described as interference. We have a closeness to one another that will always be the case.
When you have someone like China in the region, I mean, how do you deal with somebody that is so big and potentially threatening when you are a small country?
Yeah, well, I think that there is power in the collective. And in fact, all that we've in recent times asked for big conversations, like, for instance, security arrangements, deal with us as a region, as a Pacific and as a Pacific voice. So the Pacific Island Forum that's coming up will be critical to allow the Pacific to come together and have its say and have its voice heard. And I do think it's time that actually there is an opportunity for our Pacific neighbours to speak for themselves. There's a lot of commentary around what's happening in their region, very little opportunity for them to speak to it.
China's intent is very clear. They're going about this in a very robust fashion. And they continue to have high-level talks with a number of our family members. Their intent is clear. How do you resolve that?
Well, the first thing I would say is that they've been present for a number of years. Their presence is not new. Yeah. The relationship that they have with the Pacific Islands is not new. It's whether or not they're seeking to change those relationships to dip into spaces like, for instance, the potential militarisation of our region. And that's where, of course, you hear that concern being raised. But off the back of those recent trips, you also saw that the Pacific held its ground on security arrangements. And, that again, I think speaks to the fact that the Pacific are speaking and sharing their own views.
At the end of the day, though, is there anything we can do about it if they decide to do agreements?
Oh, I think the most important thing for us to constantly remember is that these are sovereign nations. They have their own relationships with China, and we have to respect, of course, their own right to develop those bilateral relationships on their terms. But the Pacific has itself already said, when it comes to our security, we come together and we talk about it as a region. And that's what we've been asking for. Give us the space to do that.
Let's talk about economic times, because, as I said, we're facing the same kind of challenges. What would your number one priority be in terms of how we can help each other to tackle potentially hard times ahead economically?
Well, one of the things that I would say is that you're absolutely right to point out that this is something we're all facing. I've just recently come back from the United States. The cost of living issues are plaguing so many of us.
In the UK.
It's in Europe. It's in the Netherlands. I've got inflation upwards of close to 10%. So these are tough times. Here, I think, speaking with one voice on the conflict of Ukraine is incredibly important to try and bring that to an end, because it is exacerbating what we're seeing in the energy markets. But then equally continuing to work together to ease supply chain constraints, because that's another pressure point. Those relationships, they do help. All of us are hoping that later on in this later part of this year, hoping to resolve.
I don't know if you've seen some of the supply issues. I mean, the satellite image of Shanghai at the moment, and the bottleneck of ships, that's not going to be ending anytime soon.
No.
Your inflation's at, what, 6.9% or thereabouts at the moment. We're fast catching up to that. Is there anything that we can do in terms of maybe labour mobility to solve some of those issues in our workplaces that you might be on the talking
Well, similar issues in New Zealand and Australia in the fact that we actually have low unemployment. We have in some areas skill shortages, but actually we are now reopened, and the final stage for those who need visas into New Zealand finishes in July. So please come and see us. We would love to have you. And if you work in some particular areas, construction, IT, come and stay for a little while longer.
We might want to hang on to those people.
We're not letting construction out of the country right now.
No.
So look, we've got free movement of people. We actually need to hold on to our skilled people at the moment. I imagine the same for you. And so, making sure that we're mindful of one another's needs is always helpful too.
And Australians are keen to travel. I mean, the passport office, the airports are just heaving this morning, absolutely clogged.
Well, it's ski season in New Zealand, and look, in regular times, Australians made up of our international skiers about 71% of the market. So Aussies love to ski in New Zealand. I can see why. It's easy, it's accessible,
Don't tell us
to
you
others.
missed us. You missed us,
We
didn't you?
you know what? I don't hesitate to say we missed you. And you will get a welcome like no other right now because we're so excited to have people back.
That is nice. What are you most looking forward to doing in Australia? You're here for a very short amount of time, aren't you?
So I didn't manage to do,
Yeah.
I won't while I'm here do anything other than just business, but I did manage to take a quick glance at Vivid from where I was last night. The light show on Sydney Harbour was beautiful. So the next trip is all work as well. But look, you know, sometime when I managed to get back, I used to like to spend a bit of time at the beach.
And the last time I spoke to you, you were expecting your little
Yes.
girl and knitted her a little beanie.
Did
That's
you?
right,
Yes, I
you
did.
did.
I did. And but it's
Was it yellow? I feel like it
Yes,
was
it was yellow.
Very yellow.
It was. It was memorable.
Yes.
And 4 years ago.
Yes,
Time
yes.
flies.
She's 4 this month. Time, absolutely. What do they say? The nights are long, but the years are fast.
Are you going okay over there in New Zealand? I mean, it's been a torrid time, hasn't it? You know, if there's going to be re-election and all that sort of stuff.
Oh, we've got a little way off before ours,
Yeah.
and so that means that right now, you know, as much as we're all facing these similar issues, at the same time, you know, there is cause for optimism. You know, speaking for our economy, we are well placed. Debt's low, unemployment's low, cost of living is set to ease. For us, it's about looking over the horizon, and a big thing for us is the joy of welcoming back those tourists. That actually brings us a lot of optimism because those closed borders, it just wasn't who we are as a nation. We derive so much joy from hospitality. So we kept our people safe. Now it's time to welcome people back.
And we love welcoming Kiwis here as well, and especially claiming the good ones as our own. So welcome back to the country. You could end up an Australian one day.
No, there's no prospect of that happening. Thank you.
That's the firmest answer we've had this morning.
It's a hard no.
Do you want to think about it?
No. Thank you, though.
Thank you for being with us. Enjoy your trip. I know it's a short one, and you're back later in the year too.
Yes.
And good luck catching up with the family later in the year as well.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure.
Thanks
to see
very
you.
much.